Hi, my name is Everett. Tonight we are reading Dogs in the Dead of Night by Mary Pope Osborne. The series we are in are the Magic Treehouse series, book number 46, and a Merlin mission. Chapter 1, The Second Thing. Jack! Jack opened his eyes. He'd been dreaming about running away from cobras. What's wrong? He said, sitting up in bed. It was still dark outside. Nothing's wrong, whispered Annie. We have to go to the treehouse and come back before it's time to get ready for school. The treehouse, said Jack sleepily. Ted and Kathleen may have translated the next lines of the spell, said Annie. We have to see if they're there, or if they've sent a message. Huh? Said Jack. He was still half asleep. We have to find the second thing to break the spell that turned Penny into a stone, said Annie. Remember? Come on. Jack, wake up. She shook his shoulder. Okay, we have to get the second thing. He jumped out of bed. I'm ready. No, you're not, said Annie. You have to put your clothes on. I'll meet you downstairs. Annie left the room. Jack quickly changed out of his pajamas and into jeans and a sweatshirt. He picked up his backpack and reached into an inside pocket. He pulled out the emerald rose they'd found in India. It was the first thing Teddy and Kathleen needed to break the spell and bring Penny back to life. Jack grabbed his notebook and pencil from his desk. He put them into his backpack along with the emerald rose. Then he slipped quietly out of his bedroom and down the stairs. Annie was waiting for him on the front porch. The sky was just starting to become light. The spring air was damp and cool. Jack was glad that he had worn a sweatshirt. All set, said Jack. Let's go. Jack and Annie ran across the wet grass of their front yard and dashed down the sidewalk. The houses they passed were all quiet, but the world of nature was awake, all with bird songs and dogs barking in the distance. Jack and Annie crossed the street and headed into the Frog Creek woods. It was hard to see in the shadowy dark, but they were so familiar with the path to the tallest oak that they quickly found their way. The treehouse was there waiting for them. No one was looking out the window. Darn, no Teddy and Kathleen, said Annie. Well, at least they sent the treehouse, said Jack. That must mean that they were able to translate the next part of the ancient spell. They must have stayed in Camelot to work on the rest. Yeah, probably, said Jack. Then she grabbed the rope ladder and started up. Jack followed. Inside the treehouse, daylight was starting to creep through the windows. Jack saw a small scroll on top of a book. That's it, he said. He picked it up and read aloud. The second thing to break the spell is a white and yellow flower. Live its meaning for yourself, if only for an hour. White and yellow flowers, said Annie. Well, that sounds easier than finding an emerald shaped like a rose. Okay, but where are we going to look for this flower? Said Jack. He picked up the book from the floor and read its title. The Swiss Alps. What's that mean? Said Annie. The Swiss Alps. Those are mountains of in the country of Switzerland, said Jack. People ski there and stuff. The Alps are the mountains they climb in the sound of music. Oh, that place. Oh, that place, said Annie. Oh, that place, said Annie. Great. Look, there's a bookmark, said Annie. Said Jack. He turned the page to a bookmark with a tall mountain peak and an open snowy area surrounded by rocky slopes. The caption read, "The Great St. Bernard Pass." That must be the exact place we're supposed to go, said Jack. Ready? Hold on, there's something else, said Annie. She picked up a small blue bottle from the floor in the shadowy corner. The bottle had a label. She read it aloud. One sip with a wish will turn you into anything you want for 1 hour. Use only once. Teddy and Kathleen. Whoa, said Jack. Anything we want? Said Annie. That's what it says, said Jack. This is going to be so much fun, said Annie. Let's get going. Annie handed the bottle. He carefully put it and the scroll into his backpack. Then he pointed to the picture of the St. Bernard Pass in the Alps book. I wish we could go there, he said. The wind started to blow. The treehouse started to spin. It spun faster and faster. Then everything was still. Absolutely still. Buried Alive. Chapter 2. Buried Alive. A cold wind swept through the window. The purple light of the setting sun filled the treehouse. Jack and Annie wore scratchy wool pants, shirts, hats, scarves, and gloves, and leather shoes. Jack's pack had turned into a leather bag. When he opened it, he saw the scroll and the blue bottle inside, along with his notebook and pencil and the emerald rose. So these are the Swiss Alps, said Annie, shivering in the cold. Pretty, but cold. Jack looked out the treehouse with her. The treehouse was nestled between gray boulders on a mountain slope. Snowy peaks loomed overhead. Below the peaks was a snow-covered pass they had seen in the picture. Smoke rose from a tall building. This must be the Great St. Bernard Pass, said Jack. He picked up their book and turned to the page with the bookmark and read, "The Great St. Bernard Pass is an ancient road between the two highest mountains peaks. For thousands of years, it was only route between Switzerland and Italy. The pass was named for Bernard of Menthon, who built the monastery there in 11th century. For hundreds of years, the monks at Swiss monastery have welcomed cold and weary travelers who are crossing the pass." "So that building must be a monastery," said Jack. "Great," said Annie. "We can start our mission by going there." "Okay," said Jack, "but I don't get it. To save Penny, we have to find a white and yellow flower, and we have to live its meaning, if only for an hour, whatever that means." "We'll figure it out," said Annie. "Let's hope," said Jack. But where do we find flowers here?" Jack and Annie looked out at the restless landscape of ice, snow, and rock. "Well, there must be flowers somewhere," said Annie. "I don't know," said Jack. "Maybe Teddy and Kathleen made a mistake and sent us to the wrong place. They've never made a mistake before, said Annie. Excuse me, Teddy didn't make a mistake by turning Penny into stone, said Jack. Okay, good point, said Annie. But let's head to the monastery and find it before it gets dark. We can ask about flowers there. But what if, started Jack. Stop worrying, interrupted Annie. Our book says the monks welcome cold, weary travelers. I'm cold and your questions make me weary. Come on. She climbed out the window into the snow. Funny, said Jack. But he was ready to find shelter, too. His face was freezing. He packed up their book and slung the leather bag over his shoulder. Then he followed Annie out the treehouse window. Jack's feet crunched down into the icy snow. As the sun went down behind the peaks, deep purple shadows climbed over the tall mountains. The monastery in the hollow below was completely hidden in darkness. We have to hurry, said Annie. No, we have to move slowly down the slope so we don't slide, said Jack. Well, then let's move slowly, quickly, said Annie. Jack and Annie started down the slope. As they carefully put one foot in front of the other, a strange sound came from above. Oh, what was that? Said Jack, looking around. Next came a low rumble like thunder. What's that? Said Annie. There came a noise like the sound of glass breaking. Whoa, cried Jack. Directly above them, the mountain, big blocks of snow were breaking into smaller chunks and sliding down the slope. Grab my hand, shouted Jack. He reached for Annie's. She gripped his hand. Suddenly, snow was moving all around them. Even the snow beneath them was sliding. A block of ice slammed into Jack, knocking him away from Annie. Jack! Cried Annie. Another chunk of snow knocked Jack off his feet and sent him tumbling headfirst down the slope. Jack kept falling downhill until a wall of frozen snow stopped him. He tried to stand, but a giant wave of soft, powdery snow blew over him, burying him completely. Jack kicked in his arms and legs, trying to surface from the fluffy sea of snow. He kicked and flailed, but the harder he struggled, the more snow there seemed to be. Snow clogged Jack's eyes, ears, and throat. Every time he coughed and sucked in more snow, he felt as if he were drowning until he finally pushed his head up through the snow into the cold air. He could breathe, but Jack still couldn't see. A gust of snow powder blinded him. He couldn't move his arms, legs, or feet. The snow around his body had turned hard and solid. Jack felt as if he were trapped in cold concrete, buried up his neck. Where was Annie? Had she been buried too? Jack tried to yell, but no sound came from his throat. He kept trying to shout for Annie, but it was hopeless. His lips wouldn't move. He couldn't even feel his mouth. He couldn't feel his arms or legs, feet or hands. He closed his eyes. He couldn't feel anything, not even the wind that kept blowing snow in his face. Ow! Jack screamed in his head. His eyes shot open. He was freezing cold. A creature was attacking him. They were whimpering, snuffling, panting, whining. Wild dogs, Jack thought with terror. 2 dogs were scratching and digging all around Jack's body. A third dog licked his his eyes and ears, and the top of his head. Jack felt as if he were about to be lit to death. "Help!" Jack tried to shout, but no sound came from his clogged throat. "Help! Help!" his mind roared, but the three huge dogs, panting creatures, kept looking at him and pawing the icy snow that had trapped his body. As the giant dogs hovered over him, Jack saw flames behind them. Figures in hooded robes were moving about in the fairy light, carrying torches. The figures were scarier than the dogs. "Jack!" came a faint cry. "Annie!" Jack croaked. A man shouted, and the dogs backed off. The flaming torches shone directly on Jack. He couldn't see that he'd been mostly dug out from the snow, but he still couldn't feel or move his body. Two of the hooded figures leaned down and tightly grabbed his arms. They pulled him to his feet. When they let him go, Jack started to fall. They grabbed him again and lifted him onto a cloth stretcher. My sister," Jack chattered. He managed to lift his head and look back. In the torchlight, he saw Annie lying on a stretcher, wrapped in blankets. "She is safe," said one of the men. Who are you?" asked Jack, shivering uncomfortably. He had lost his hat and scarf in the snow. "We are monks from the St. Bernard Monastery," a man answered. He covered Jack with a heavy blanket. "Oh, thank you," whispered Jack. The three dogs led the way over the snowy pass, snorting and sneezing and panting. The monks followed, carrying Jack and Annie through the cold, windy dark. The Saints. Chapter 3. The Saints. When they reached the monastery, the monks lowered the two stretchers to the ground. They helped Jack and Annie to their feet and then led them up a short flight of steps to a big wooden door. "You okay?" Jack asked Annie. Yes, she said. "Sorry." "You?" "Just cold," said Jack, shivering. One monk rang a large bell outside the door. Another handed Jack his leather bag. "We found it beside you," the man said. "Thank you," said Jack. He'd forgotten all about the bag. Someone inside pulled the door open. Jack and Annie limped into a torchlit hallway with a vaulted ceiling and a wide staircase. The monks and three dogs followed. The monks lifted the hood, revealing friendly faces. For the first time, Jack got a good look at the huge panting dogs. They were St. Bernards with white and reddish-brown fur. They had powerful heads, square muscles, and drooping jowls. As the monks who had rescued Jack and Annie went down the hall with the dogs, two other monks stepped forward. They both wore dark robes and round black caps. "Welcome," one said in a deep, warm voice. He was a large man with a ragged face. "I am Father Lorne, the head of the monastery." "I am Brother Michael." I am Brother Michael," said the other monk. He was not much taller than Jack, and his face was smooth and rosy. "We're Jack and Annie," Jack said hoarsely. He still didn't have his full voice. "Thank you for saving us," said Annie. We were happy to do so, said Father Laurent. You must come and sit by the fire in the parlor to warm yourselves and dry your clothes, Brother Michael. Brother Michael will take you there while I ask our cook to warm some soup for you. Thanks, said Annie. That sounds great, Jack nodded. He wanted to lie down, but at the same time he was hungry and cold. Come with me, said Brother Michael. Are you able to walk on your own? Sure, said Jack. Jack and Annie could walk without help, but they both limped a little as they followed Brother Michael down the hall into the dimly lit parlor. The 3 St. Bernard dogs were resting in front of a huge fireplace. Wow, breathed Annie. The dogs barely looked up. Please sit by the fire, said Brother Michael. Jack and Annie sat on wooden chairs and stared in a daze at the crackling fire. A moment later, Father Laurent came into the room and handed the bowls of steaming soup. The 2 monks waited as Jack and Annie drank the hot broth. By the time they had emptied their bowls, Jack was feeling much better. The hot liquid had warmed his inside, and the heat from the fire had nearly dried his clothes. Thank you, I feel a lot better now, Annie said to the monks. You must stay here and rest for the night, said Father Laurent. You can continue your journey in the morning when you are rested. Thank you, said Jack. The monk looked at them curiously. You must be very brave to try to travel in the pass in the dark, he said. Or not very smart, said Annie. Father Laurent smiled. Yes, but he did not want to say that, he said. No kidding. We were looking for flowers, said Annie. Goodness, said Brother Michael. I'm afraid you've come to the wrong place to pick flowers. Both monks chuckled, and Annie laughed with them. Jack could barely smile. He was worried. I know we came to the wrong place, he thought. Now tell me, why are you really traveling on the pass? Asked Father Laurent. Well, actually, we're on a mission, said Jack. Indeed, said Brother Michael. Yes, said Jack. We're on a mission to learn more about the Alps, said Annie. That's right, said Jack. We're doing a report. But you are very young, said Brother Michael. We are young, said Annie, but we are serious researchers. In fact, we recently went to India and studied the Taj Mahal. It's amazingly beautiful. Have you ever seen it? No, we haven't, said Brother Michael. He seemed a little surprised, but Father Laurent only smiled. Before either of the monks could say more, Annie continued. I have some questions right now about these mountain dogs. Jack, get out your notebook. Jack reached into his bag and took out his pencil and notebook. So Annie said in a serious voice, Actually, how did your dogs know that we needed help? Well, the saints always know if someone is trapped in the snow, said Brother Michael. The saints? Asked Jack. The monks pointed to the dogs lying near the hearth. Our St. Bernard dogs, he said. We have 15 of them. We call them Simple the Saints. They were named after St. Bernard, who founded the monastery. Oh, right, said Jack. St. Bernard's of Menthon. He pushed his glasses into place and took notes. Saints are rescue dogs. The saints have saved over 1,000 people from the White Death, said Brother Michael. And the White Death is what? Asked Jack, looking up. That is what we call a blizzard and avalanches, said Brother Michael. You were directly in the path of a very small avalanche. You are quite common in the spring. When the snow begins to melt, it loses its grip from on the mountain and slides down, Jack wrote. Avalanches. Often in spring, snow melts and slides, called the White Death. You were lucky, said Father Laurent. Avalanche victims are rarely survived if they are trapped for long in the snow. Even a very small avalanche can be deadly. So there wasn't much time for the saints to find us and save us, was there? Said Annie. No, said Father Laurent, but they need no compass. Once they hear a voice in the snow, as we call it, their noses lead them to it in the right direction. They can find their way to a person buried 6 feet down. Oh man, said Jack, murmuring. Oh man, Jack murmured. He wrote, St. Bernard's, here, voice of snow, great noses. Wow, they're amazing, said Annie. Everyone looked at the dogs. Thank you, saints, for saving our lives, Annie said to them. The gentle giants didn't seem to care about being heroes. One scratched his ears, another yawned, and a third one snored. Father Laurent laughed at the dogs. Well, Jack and Annie, I imagine you would like to sleep now, he said. Jack closed his notebook and nodded. We're pretty tired, said Annie. Come, I will take you to your room, Brother Michael said. Good night, Jack and Annie, said Father Laurent, and farewell, for I will not be seeing you in the morning. I am setting out first thing to help the French army. What does that mean? Wondered Jack. Thanks for everything, said Annie. Of course, said Father Laurent. I am glad you are safe now. No one should ever be caught on these mountains in the dead of night. Barry. Chapter 4. Barry. Jack and Annie followed Brother Michael out of the parlor. The monk carried 2 lanterns and chatted while he led them down a chilly hallway. This monastery was built on the highest part of the pass almost 800 years ago, Brother Michael said. We have a dog kennel and a chapel, as well as a library filled with books and exhibits of rocks, minerals, and butterflies. Father Laurent is quite well known for his research and his nature expeditions. That's cool, murmured Jack. But we have too worried about their mission to say any more. How will we ever find a flower here? He wondered again. Brother Michael opened a door to a small room. We have many rooms for travelers, he said. But tonight you are our only visitors. The monk placed a lantern on a table between 2 small beds. I hope you will sleep well. I will be glad to answer them tomorrow. Thanks. Good night, said Annie. Good night, said Brother Michael, and he left the room and closed the door. Jack and Annie sat on their beds. The lantern light was casting shadows on the white walls of the small room. The wind rattled the window panes. "I'm so glad to be here," said Annie, sighing, "and not lost outside in the dead of night." She lay back and covered herself with the brown wool blankets. "No kidding," said Jack. "But it still makes no sense that Teddy and Kathleen sent us here." "We'll figure it all out tomorrow," said Annie. Jack reached into his bag and took out the small scroll. He unrolled it and read aloud by the lantern light. "The second thing to break the spell, in a white and yellow flower. Live its meaning for yourselves, if only for an hour." It's a mystery, said Jack. "No flower can live in the cold, snowy place like this and live its meaning. What's that about? And why just an hour?" "I don't know," murmured Annie. She closed her eyes and yawned. "Aren't you tired?" "Yeah, very," said Jack. "But I'm also worried about our mission." He put the scroll back into his bag and pulled out the research book. He flipped through it until he came to a section with photos of plants and animals. He read the chapter title out loud: "Flora and Fauna of the Alps." He looked at Annie. "Flora and fauna means plants and animals. Did you know that?" Annie didn't open her eyes or say anything. "Are you sleeping?" asked Jack. "Yes," said Annie. "You should go to sleep, too. You can read all this stuff in the morning." "But nothing makes sense," said Jack. I don't know if I can sleep." "Try," said Annie. Jack sighed. He closed the research book and placed it on the floor. Then he blew out the lantern flame and pulled up his wool blanket. Jack kept his eyes open, but he couldn't see a thing. The room was pitch black. For somewhere in the monastery came soft, beautiful singing. 2 or 3 St. Bernards. Saint barked. The panes of the window rattled as the wind moaned outside. We forgot to ask what year it is," said Jack. He hardly could tell. Don't you think?" "Shh," whispered Annie. "But it feels timeless here." Jack went on. Everything could be in a time long ago or in our time. Sun, snow, mountains, monks, soup, singing, wind, wool, night. Jack closed his eyes. And dogs, murmured Annie. "Dogs," Jack repeated in a whisper, and he fell fast asleep. Jack opened his eyes. Cold gray light came through a paned window. "Where am I?" he wondered. He sat up, put his glasses on, and looked around the white-walled room. Annie was still asleep. "Oh yeah, the monastery," thought Jack. "Hey, Annie," he whispered. "Wake up." "Where are we?" Annie asked, opening her eyes. "In the Swiss Alps," said Annie. We are? Why?" asked Annie, groggily. "Good question," said Jack. "Let's read about flora and fauna of the Alps and figure it all out." The research book Jack reached for the book on the floor. Just as he grabbed it, the door banged open. A St. Bernard dog burst into the room. The dog flung himself onto Jack's bed. "Ah!" Jack yelled. "Whoa!" cried Annie. The giant dog plopped down on top of Jack and panted. His head was as big as a basketball. His breath smelled like fish and crackers. His first smell of wet wool. "Okay, get off me, please," said Jack. He tried to push the dog off, but the dog was wrinkled his brow and looked curiously into Jack's eyes. Drool hung from his long jaws. "Ew, Annie, help," said Jack. "Hey, you," Annie called to the huge panting dog. "Come to me." The St. Bernard jumped off of Jack and bounded onto Annie's bed. With the same joy and energy, Annie couldn't stop giggling as the dog licked her face. "Barry," said Brother Michael. He stood in the doorway. Ignoring the monk, the dog nuzzled Annie with his giant head. "Stop, stop," she said, laughing. Barry off," the monk said. "Barry," said Jack, trying to help. The dog looked over at Jack, then he leaped off Annie's bed. "Oh no!" cried Jack. "Don't come back to me." He covered his head with his blanket, but it was too late. Barry jumped back onto Jack's bed and started pawing at the blanket, trying to dig Jack out from underneath. "Barry, come," commanded Brother Michael. "Now." Finally, the St. Bernard leaped off of Jack's bed and bounded into the hallway. Brother Michael quickly closed the door behind the rowdy giant. "Well, now you've met Barry," he said. Out in the hall, Barry whined and pawed at the door, begging to come back into the room. "Oh, poor puppy," said Annie. "Barry may be young," said Brother Michael, "but he is 200 pounds, 200-pound dog who needs to grow up." Said Annie. She laughed tenderly at the mournful sound was making. Wonderful sounds Barry was making. "Perhaps you do not realize that," said Brother Michael, "but it was past noon. You have been asleep for many hours." "Really? Oh, man," said Jack. He jumped off his bed and grabbed his shoes and put them on. He couldn't believe they'd wasted so much time. We are just completing our noontime meal in the dining hall before we hike down the pass," said Brother Michael. "Thousands of French soldiers will be crossing soon onto Italy. Father Laurent left to assist the first troops. I thought perhaps you would like to eat some before the rest of us leave to help." Sure, thanks," said Jack. "I will wait for you in the dining hall next to the parlor," said the monk. When Brother Michael slipped out of the door, Barry greeted him with a happy yelp. Then the giant dog's barking faded into the hallway. He's all yours. Chapter 5. He's all yours. "Come on, hurry," said Annie, pulling on her shoes. "But we have to look in our books," said Jack, "and try to figure out. Let's look after we talk to Brother Michael," said Annie. "He's leaving soon, and I have the feeling that he or someone else here is going to help us." "Let's hope," said Jack. Someone still sore from the avalanche, Jack limped a little as he followed Annie out of the room. They passed all the closed doors lining the long torch-lit hallway until they finally came to the parlor. From the dining hall, he could hear the clinking of silverware and china, but no voices. Jack and Annie peered into the room and saw about 40 monks sitting on the benches on either side of a long table. Brother Michael waved from one end. The other monks didn't even look up. They all kept their heads bowed as they silently finished eating their noon meal. Jack and Annie crossed the dining hall, weaving among a dozen St. Bernards resting with their heads on their paws. None of them had Barry's crazy energy. Jack and Annie sat on the end of the bench and across from Brother Michael. One of the other monks served them bread and butter, bowls of porridge, and cups of hot tea. Jack took a sip of the milky sweet tea. Then he leaned across the table to Brother Michael. "Excuse me," he whispered, "but is there another place in these mountains, a place not too far from here, where we might find flowers?" Brother Michael looked thoughtful. Then he shook his head. "Certainly not now. It has been a very cold spring, but a month from now, at a lower altitude, that you will definitely find flowers." "Not until a month from now," said Jack. "I am afraid not," said Brother Michael. He smiled curiously at Jack. "You must love flowers very much." Jack didn't know what to say. How could he possibly explain that they had to find a white and yellow flower and live its meaning for an hour to help break a spell to save Merlin's penguin, who'd been turned into stone by a young sorcerer in Camelot? Yes, I do like them," said Jack. "Perhaps you could go on a climbing trip with Father Laurent if you come back this way in the summer," said Brother Michael. He also loves flowers and plants and is an expert in the flora of the Alps. Jack nodded. He picked up a chunk of bread and took a small bite. "That would be great," he thought, "except we can't wait." His only hope was that the research book could help them somehow. But now all the monks were getting up from the table. The saints quietly followed them out of the dining hall. As Jack ate his bread and watched everyone leave, Barry bounded out of the kitchen. He grabbed the last bite of his bread now out of Jack's hand and gulped it down. "Hey!" said Jack. Annie burst out laughing. "Barry, you thief!" she cried. Without a word, Brother Michael grabbed Barry by his collar, but the dog broke loose from the monk and ran around the room. He went down on his forelegs. He barked his happy bark, arf, 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 booming bark, as if he daring them to catch him. Annie laughed again. Brother Michael sighed. "I apologize for the theft of your bread," he said to Jack. "May I get you some more?" No, it's okay," said Jack. Barry's bark shook the dining hall. "Excuse me, I will Take him to the kitchen, Brother Michael said. He grabbed Barry by the collar again. This time he held on tightly and pulled him into the kitchen. The dining hall was empty now except for Jack and Annie. Listen, we can't waste any time here, said Jack, rising from the table. I'm going to go back to our room and read about the flora and fauna of the Alps. I'll go with you, said Annie. As Jack and Annie were leaving, Brother Michael came out of the kitchen alone. I apologize for Barry, he said, frowning. We will be leaving tomorrow. Why? Where is he going? Asked Annie. Down to the house in the valley, said the monk. But he seems so happy here, said Annie. Oh, he is very happy here, said Brother Michael. Too happy. It will break his heart to leave. So why does he have to leave, said Annie. Because we are in a very independent spirit, and none of us has the time to give him extra training he needs, said Brother Michael. Well, what if I train him? Asked Annie. What? Jack looked at her in surprise. Not really. I can do it, said Annie. She turned back to the monk. You can give that job to me. I know about training dogs, and I'm really good with animals. Right, Jack? Yeah, but, said Jack. Please, let me try, said Annie to Brother Michael. You are very kind, however, Brother Michael was interrupted by a howl from the kitchen. The monk shook his head. Listen to me. He will cry night and day if he has to leave, and Father Lawrence shall miss him terribly. He paused and looked at Annie. Perhaps we should give him one more chance. If you really think you can handle him, shall I put him on your charge today, and we will see what training you can give him? Yes, said Annie. Good. Then I will bring him to you, said Brother Michael, and he leaned back to the kitchen. Are you nuts? Jack whispered to Annie. You don't know how to train a crazy dog like that. Actually, I do, said Annie. For your inventor nation, I just read in a book on training dogs. I even wrote a report about it. But you haven't had any practice, said Jack. And even if you had, we didn't have time now. What about saving Penny? Did you forget our mission? No, I was thinking this would give us an excuse to stay here longer. Yeah, okay, said Jack. But stay for what? Brother Michael said there are no flowers around here. We have to stay for a month. Okay, said Annie. Listen, what about the magic potion? We can change into anything we want for an hour. Yes, so, said Jack. Well, do you think we could wish to change into something like an official finder to white and yellow flower? Asked Annie. No, said Jack. Stupid, yeah, said Annie. So let's think. Before they had time to think, Brother Michael came out of the kitchen. He was carrying monk's robes and had Barry on a leash. The huge dog dragged Brother Michael over to Jack and Annie, swinging his tail and barking with excitement. "You can work with him in the enclosed yard," said Brother Michael. He pointed to a door off the dining hall. "And you may want to beware these over your clothes. It is quite cold outside." He handed them the monk's robes. Jack and Annie pulled on the robes and tied the rope belts around their waists. Then they lifted their hoods over their heads. "Perfect," said Annie. "Much warmer." "Good," said Brother Michael. "He's all yours." He handed Barry's leash to Jack. Jack gripped it in both hands as the big dog tugged on the other end. "All of us will be gone from the monastery for the afternoon," said Brother Michael. "If you would take a walk, you must not let Barry off the leash. Whatever you do, do not let him run freely outside. I am certain he would dash off and explore the mountains and get lost in the snow." "Don't worry, we'll keep him in the yard," said Annie. "I'm very grateful for the help," said Brother Michael. "Perhaps this will even assist you with the research about the Alps." "I'll bet it will," said Annie. "Well, goodbye. Good luck." Brother Michael smiled. "I fear you are the ones who will need luck today," he said. "Be good, Barry." Then the rosy-faced monk hurried off to catch up with the others. "Okay, let's get started," said Annie. "Come on, Barry." She threw open the door to the snowy yard surrounded by a rock wall. Barry instantly lurched forward to the yard. "Arr!" cried Jack as the dog nearly yanked off his arms. Good Dog. Chapter 6. Good Dog. Barry dragged Jack out of the door of the dining hall and into the yard. The air was cold and damp. The sky was gray and the mountain peaks were surrounded in mist. "Barry, sit," said Annie. But Barry didn't sit. Instead, he put his nose to the ground and pulled Jack all around the yard. Then he smelled the snow and the rock walls. Then he raised his head and closed his eyes, sniffing the air. "What does he smell?" Jack wondered. Jack couldn't smell anything in the cold mountain air. Annie ran to Jack and Barry and scratched Barry's behind the ear. "Come on, Barry, let's get to work," said Annie with enthusiasm. The big dog opened his eyes and wagged his tail. His whole body seemed to be wagging. "Now, Barry, to start with, you have to learn 3 commands," said Annie. "Come, sit, and stay." Barry sneezed as if to say, "No problem," and he turned to Jack. When he obeys and the command, we give him lots of praise. We should act really positive and upbeat. That's what my book said. Jack rolled his eyes. "Positive," Annie repeated. "Upbeat? Let's start with come. I'll hold him. You walk away and then stop and say, 'Come, Barry.'" Jack sighed and handed Annie the leash. She struggled to keep Barry with her as Jack walked about 20 feet away. Jack turned and said, "Come, Barry." Annie let go of the leash. Barry charged toward Jack. When he reached him, he jumped up and put his paws on Jack's shoulders. Jack fell backwards in the snow. "Ow!" said Jack. "The dog, good dog," said Annie, clapping. Barry leaned over and slurped his tongue across Jack's face. "Yuck! Stop, stop," said Jack. He scrambled to his feet before Barry could give him another sloppy kisses. Annie ran over and patted Barry as she repeated, "Good dog, good dog." Barry's eyes were bright and happy. He panted in short, quick breaths, as if he were laughing. "Good dog," said Jack. "You've got to be kidding." Yes, he did what you said. Come, and he came," said Annie. Come on," said Jack. A positive upbeat. "Oh, sorry," said Jack, wiping his ears with his sleeve. "I love your slobber, Barry. It's my favorite thing." "Okay, say that all over again, but use a happy voice," said Annie. "Don't be ridiculous," said Jack. "Come on, let's move along." "Right," said Annie. I think he's got come. Here, take the leash back, and we'll sit. Ready, Barry? Sit." And he pushed down on Barry's rear end, and Barry sat. "Good dog," said Annie. "Now pull the leash up, Jack, so he lifted his head." Jack tugged on the leash. Barry pulling Barry's head up. The Saint Bernard looked at Jack's eyes. Then he leaped up and licked his face with his huge pink tongue. Jack yelped and fell backward again into the snow. Before Barry could pounce on him, Jack scrambled to his feet, nearly trapped in his robe. "Oh, man," he said to Barry. "What is wrong with you?" Nothing's wrong with him, Jack," said Annie. "He just likes you." "Tell him not to like me so much," said Jack. "Come on, be positive," said Annie. "No, I'm done with training," said Jack. "You can do it by yourself. I'm going inside to read about flora and fauna in the research book." "But it's easier with two of us," said Annie. "Just one more command, please." Annie looked hopefully at Jack. Barry looked at Jack too. His tail had stopped wagging. "Oh, okay," said Jack, sighing. "One more command." "Yay, thanks," said Annie. Barry barked and wagged his tail. "Let's hurry in the stay command," said Annie. "We'll teach Barry to go down on all fours and stay like all the dogs in the dining hall this morning." "He'll never be that calm," said Jack. Annie handed the leash. "Here, now try to gently pull Barry's head down while I press between his shoulder blades. See, I memorized all that stuff." "Okay, Jack." Yeah, said Jack. He knelt in front of Barry and gently pulled down on the leash. Annie pushed Barry's shoulders with the palms of her hands. Barry didn't move. "I can't find his shoulder blades," said Annie. "Try this," said Jack. Pull his front legs. Pull them out in front of him." Jack grabbed Barry's front legs and pulled. Barry jumped up and put his paws on Jack's shoulders again, knocking him into the snow. For the third time, the giant dog flopped onto Jack's chest and pinned him to the ground. "Get off!" Jack gasped. I can't breathe." But Barry's brown eyes just stared happily at Jack. His cool nose sniffed Jack's face. "Get off me, please," Jack commanded. Annie laughed. You really love Jack, don't you, Barry?" she said. Barry answered yes, with a big sneeze right into Jack's face. He bounded it to his feet. "Ew, Jack," said Annie, laughing. "Gross," cried Jack, wiping his face with the rough sleeve of his robe. "Okay, that's it." He scrambled to his feet. "I'm done. I'm so done with this. See you guys." "Wait, we'll go with you," said Annie. "Come on, Barry. We'll do more training later. But you did a really great job with a good dog." "Oh, brother," said Jack. Barry sneezed again and gave his body a shake. Annie held the door and the big dog trotted into the monastery, his head held high. Chapter 7. I Don't Believe It. Jack and Annie followed Barry inside. In the dining hall, Barry bounded over to one of the large dog bowls and slurped water. He splashed more outside of the bowl than he actually drank. When he finished, he glumped toward Jack, water and drool flying out of his mouth. "Stay away from me," said Jack, pushing Barry away. "Annie, I'm going to read now." Jack hurried out of the dining hall and headed down the hall toward the room, but Annie and Barry dashed ahead of him. The dog was playing. Barks echoed through the monastery, making it seem full of live despite. It's emptiness. As soon as they entered the bedroom, Jack grabbed the door and grabbed their book. Barry jumped into Annie's bed. As Jack started to read about Flora in the Alps, Barry yelped. He leaped up and barked at the door. "What now?" said Jack. "Someone's ringing the bell," said Annie. "The bell at the front door. Hear it?" Jack could barely hear the bell clanging over Barry's barking. "We'd better go answer it," said Annie. But when no one else is here. So come on, Barry." "Wait, no," said Jack. I'll go with you, Barry. I'll go with you. Barry should stay here so he doesn't jump all over whoever's there." "Okay, wait here, Barry," said Annie. Jack left the book on his bed, and he and Annie hurried out of the bedroom. Before Barry could follow them, Jack closed the door tightly. The dog howled. "Don't cry, we'll be back soon," shouted Annie. Then she and Jack hurried down the torchlit hallway to the front entrance. The bell kept clanging. Annie opened the heavy wooden door. She and Jack peered outside. Two men in military uniforms stood on the steps of the monastery. One had a black mustache and the other had a bushy sideburns. Both wore blue and white coats with red cuffs and red collars. White pants were tucked into their riding boots. Swords hung from their sides. Jack was startled. The soldiers looked as if they'd stepped out of a long time ago. Good afternoon. We think one of our officers may be here, said the soldier with the mustache. I'm afraid your officer isn't here, said Jack. No one is here but us. All the monks have left to help the French army. We are an advance party, and the officer got separated from us, said the second soldier. Consul Nepomucen hoped we had made his way here on his own. Napoleon, asked Jack. First Consul Napoleon Bernard, the soldier said. Oh man, thought Jack. Napoleon Bonaparte was a famous military leader in France. When your official arrives, please tell him to wait for us, said the man with the mustache. We will return later. The two soldiers turned and walked away from the monastery. Jack whirled around to Annie. Did you hear his name of the leader, Napoleon Bonaparte? He lived 200 years ago. Let's go look in our book. Maybe it has information about Napoleon crossing the Alps. Jack and Annie hurried down the torchlit hallway to a room. Oh wow, said Jack, pointing at one of the torches. I should have figured out we weren't in our time. We don't use torches and lanterns for lighting anymore. Well, we have a lot of your mind, said Annie. Monks seem timeless. Jack went on. But as soon as you see a soldier, you can start to figure it out, the time in history. I can wait to read about it in our book. Maybe there will be a clue to help us with our mission. Jack ran to the rest of the way down the way to their room. He opened the door and stopped. Oh no, he said. I don't believe it. Annie caught up to Jack and peered into the room. Oh, Barry, she said. Barry was sitting on the floor, wagging his tail. Paper was hanging from his mouth. He ate the Alps book, said Jack, stunned. He ate it. All around the room were pieces of paper. Jack started to collect the pieces, but it was hopeless. Most of the book was in Barry's mouth. Was in Barry's stomach. I really don't believe this, said Jack. Bad dog, Barry, yelled Annie. Barry stopped wagging his tail and lowered his head. Bad, Annie, said Annie sternly. Bad, bad, bad. Barry kept his head low and wiggled his way toward the door. When he stood up and with his tail drooping, he slunk out of the room. Jack flopped down on his bed and stared at the ceiling. There's no hope now, he said. We'll never read about flora and fauna in the Alps or about Napoleon or anything. I feel like we'll never figure out the mission to save Penny. Figure out this mission or save Penny. Annie sat next to him. I'm sorry, she said. It's not your fault, said Jack. Well, I shouldn't have offered to train Barry, said Annie. We should have studied the book when you wanted to. Jack shook his head. Whatever, he said. I just don't know what to do next. We can't go home yet. We can't give up. We have to save Penny. I know, said Annie. Maybe we just go outside and walk around. Get some fresh air. Want to? I guess, said Jack. He picked up his bag and sighed. Maybe if we just walk around, we'll think of something. Let's find Barry first, said Annie. Why, said Jack. So he can help us some more, said Annie. No, I just want to make sure he's okay, said Annie. I feel kind of bad for yelling. Jack and Annie headed out of the door and down the hall. Barry, called Annie. There's no sign of him. I wonder where he went, said Annie. Barry, when he comes, just don't tell him he's a good dog, said Jack. They passed the dining hall and looked outside. Barry, she called again, but the room was empty. Jack and Annie kept walking until they came to the parlor. Barry, called Annie, peering in, but there was no sign. That room was empty too. Jack felt a cold wind blowing. It grew colder as he and Annie kept walking down the hallway, heading for the front door. Barry, called Annie. The whole monastery felt quiet and empty, cold. Jack and Annie were both shivering by the time they reached the front hall. I wonder where... Oh, no, said Annie. Look, she pointed to the front door. It was open. We must have not closed the door hard enough, and the wind blew it open. Barry must have gone out, and he rushed outside. Barry! Barry! Oh, man, said Jack. He hurried out into the cold, too. Barry! Barry! The only sounds they heard were the whistling of over the pass. The only sight was snow flying through the air. There, he's run away, wailed Annie. I know it. Barry, Jack called. He'll get lost, said Annie. Brother Michael, said he should never run loose. He'll get lost and never find his way home. He can't have gone far, said Jack. Don't panic, we'll find him. Jack and Annie began wandering through the cold, shouting, Barry! Barry! Gusts of wind blew over the pass, whirling snow around them. Barry! Barry! They called. Jack kept expecting to see the dog bounding through the white powder, but how could he just disappear? I don't know what to do, said Annie, hugging herself. They both stopped walking. They were shivering in their robes and their teeth chattering. Maybe we should go back and look through the monastery again, said Jack. No, I know he's not there, said Annie. I can feel it. He's lost somewhere. I'm sure of it. Tears filled her eyes. I really hurt his feelings when I said, bad, bad, bad. He didn't know our book was so important. He thought he was a good dog. I kept telling him he was a good dog, but really he wasn't a very good dog, Jack. He just He was just funny. Happy dog. I should have closed the door all the way. Tears ran down her cheeks. I feel terrible. Hey, it wasn't your fault, said Jack. I feel terrible too. I could have closed the door, but don't worry. When the others come back, the dogs can help us find him. That's a long time from now, said Annie, still crying. It will be really dark. I don't know, said Jack. He put his hands on Annie's back and spoke gently. But the saints can find him in the dark like they found us. If they can smell people really far away, they can smell a big dog like Barry. I wish we could smell him right now, said Annie. I wish we were dogs. Then we could find him. She covered her face, sobbing, and sobbed. I wish we were dogs, said Jack. Yes, said Annie, sniffling, so we could find him. Well, Jack took a deep breath. Okay, I think I know what we can do, he said. What can we do? Asked Annie, wiping her face. This is what we can do, said Jack. He reached into his bag and pulled out the bottle from Teddy and Kathleen. Annie stared at Jack. Oh, wow, she breathed. We can use this to turn into dogs and find Barry, said Jack. Jack, that's the best idea you ever had, said Annie. Jack smiled. Okay, here's what we'll do, he said. We'll each take a sip, then together we'll stay. Turn us into St. Bernard dogs, and we'll turn into dogs for an hour, said Annie. Dogs for an hour, said Jack. He took another deep breath. Then he pulled the cork out of the bottle. Chapter 8. Dogs for an hour. Ready, said Jack. Annie nodded. Ready, she said. Jack took a sip of the potion and handed the bottle to Annie. She took a sip of the potion and put the bottle down on the ground. They looked at each other. Okay, together, said Jack. 1, 2, 3. Turn us into St. Bernard dogs. Then they shouted into the cold wind. Nothing happened. Then suddenly Jack was hurled face first into the snow. The world went black. Jack felt his body shaking uncomfortably. When the shaking stopped, Jack opened his eyes. He wasn't dizzy. He wasn't scared or worried or tired. He felt enormously happy. He looked and white fur. He had 4 furry legs with big paws. Some moved behind Jack. He turned and saw a fluffy tail waving. He leaped toward it. Then the tail moved away. Jack realized his tail was his. Still, it was fun to try to catch it. He turned in a circle around and around and around. Jack noticed that snowflakes floated like feathers through the air. He stopped chasing his tail and bounced around clumsily, trying to eat the swirling flakes. He snapped the air until he heard another bark. Jack understood the dog's language right away. Jack, Jack! Jack looked at the St. Bernard running toward him through the snow. She was a little smaller, than smoother fur and bright, lively eyes. She barked, "Wow, wow, can you believe this?" Jack and Annie laughed with short bursts of loud panting. Their tongues hung out of their mouths, and their breath billowed into the cold. The world was alive with exciting sounds Jack had never heard before. The sounds weren't loud, but they were clear and distinct, along with the ha 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 of their heavy breathing. Jack heard a swish swish of the wind-driven snow and crick crack of the ice on the mountain slope. Smell, barked Annie. She and Jack lifted their big black noses into the air and sniffed. Strong scents of wafted all the directions. Jack stepped forward, sniffing this way and that. His nostrils quivered. She smelled changed. The smells changed with every step and every turn of his head. The sky had a scent. The distant chimney smoke, craggy rocks and mountain slopes, all the different scents. Jack, Jack smushed his nose into the newly fallen snow. The wind blew. The snow held a dozen different smells, all wonderful and amazing. Jack licked the snow like ice cream. It was so cold, he felt hot. Jack, Jack! Annie barked again. Jack looked at a better, his nose covered with snow. Jack stood perfectly still, her paw up. Annie stood perfectly still, her paw up. Jack sniffed the air. The wind snow carried different smells that stood out from all the others. A whiff of fish and crackers mixed with wet fur. Amid the sounds and wind and ice, Jack heard distant barking. "Barry!" Jack barked. He had been so busy discovering what it was like to be a dog, he'd almost forgotten Barry. Jack and Annie started yapping and bumping against each other. They bolted until the wind and the flying snow scrambled over the rocks and plowing through the snowdrift. Jack's 4 legs were nimble and strong. The freezing cold didn't bother him at all. He didn't feel a bit stiff. None of his muscles ached. Jack and Annie ran this way and that through the fresh mountain air, following the sound and scent. Then Barry's barking grew louder. They slowed down, and then they saw him. "Barry!" Jack barked. Barry stood on a small ridge above his tail, high in the air. When he saw Jack and Annie, his head he looked surprised. his tail in the air. When he saw Jack and Annie, he looked surprised. He sniffed the air. He cocked his head to the side. "It's us," barked Annie. Barry began yelping with glee. He leaped off the ridge and half tumbling, half running down the slope to greet them. Barry's giant head pushed against Jack and Annie. His eyes shone in the snowy afternoon light as they all nudged each other and sniffed. Three tails wagged in the air. Barry howled and whined. You're dogs. How? Magic," barked Annie. Barry sneezed. "Oh, okay." Then he went down on his front paws and barked, "Let's play." The three of them started playing fighting. They stood up on their back legs and pushed each other around. Jack nipped and barked at Barry's fur. Annie nibbled his ears. Jack, Annie, and Barry bounced and barked and fell and fought until finally they all collapsed onto the snow and rolled over onto their backs, sticking their paws in the air. Rubbing his fur back against the crunchy snow felt wonderful to Jack. He wiggled and rocked from side to side. Then he and Annie and Barry stood up and gave their wet bodies good shakes. They shook their heads to flaking drool and snow on each other. But Jack didn't mind drooling a bit now. He was completely happy to be a big furry dog playing in the snowstorm in the mountains. Even though the wind whipped against him and it was hard to see, he felt no fear. He was warm. His body was sturdy and strong, and he could smell and hear a whole new world of the scent and sounds. Relaxed and happy, Jack decided to give Barry some advice. Listen, man," he barked. "If you want to stay with your monks, and you have to get serious and act responsibility." Barry turned his giant head from side to side, listening to Jack. Jack barked, Do not knock people over, and when they tell you say sit, you sit. And when they say sit, you sit. Same with come and stay." Barry looked curious. "Huh," he barked. "Don't chew things like books," Jack barked. "And don't cry like a puppy. When people leave you, you're a big, funny dog, but you could be a great dog." Before Barry could answer, Jack felt a distant tremor, and he heard a whoomp. He knew that sound. He sprang to his feet and lifted his paws, listening. Annie and Barry scrambled to their feet and listened too. Jack heard the sound of rumbling in ice, cracking, and snow sliding. Barry barked and bolted in the direction of the noises. Jack and Annie followed him down the path. The three of them swerved around rocks and threaded their way along the narrow path. Then they stopped and whimpered and whining. A pile of avalanche snow blocked their way. The with barely a pause, Barry barreled on. His paws and powerful chest plowed through the snow, clearing a passage. Jack and Annie plowed after Barry. Then they all stopped. A black hat was lying on top of snow ahead of them. A knapsack was buckled lay next to it. Barry, Jack and Annie yelled and quivered as they sniffed the hat in the knapsack. Jack smelled wool, metal, and leather. Dig, dig, Barry barked. Jack, Annie, and Barry swept the snow with their huge paws. Bucketsfuls of snow flew behind them, whimpering and whining. They dug deeper and deeper. The snow they cleared, the more smells Jack inhaled. Hair, wool, blood. Barry yelped. He had uncovered a face. A young man's face with brows, hair matted against the white skin. The blood scratches and bluish lips. Jack remembered being caught in the avalanche and how the dogs had saved him. He barked at Barry, telling him to lick the man's face. Barry swept his warm tongue across the man's eyes and nose and mouth. Barry snuffled and whined, and kept licking. He frantically licked the man's ears and hair. Jack and Annie stood back, watching Barry work his way. The avalanche victim, Barry's St. Bernard instinct had taken over. He kept licking. He kept licking and licking until the man's eyeballs fluttered open. The man blinked. Then he blinked again. He was alive. He tried to speak, but no sound came from his mouth. Then something else seemed to grab Barry's attention. The dog jumped up and held his nose in the air. He barked, "Stay, Jack and Annie. I'll be back. Dig." Then he scrambled down the snow passage and disappeared. "Barry!" Annie barked. She started to go after him. "He told us to stay," Jack barked. "Keep digging." Mama? Jack and Annie dug deeper and deeper into the snow, uncovering the rest of the man's body. His blue, white, and red uniform was Arab's, was with brass buttons and with leather boots. They began licking his hands and they licked and licked until his fingers trembled. Jack and Annie barked with joy. Suddenly, Jack felt a shock pass through him. His body was shot through his head, chest, back, and forelegs. He and Annie were hurled away from the man in the snow. The world went black. Jack felt his whole body shaking wildly. Finally, Jack was still. He opened his eyes. In a daze, he saw a French soldier lying in the snow nearby. Jack wasn't a St. Bernard dog anymore. He was a person again. Annie was a person too. I guess the magic hour just ended. Chapter 9. Lovers of Knowledge. Jack and Annie crawled over to the soldier lying in the snow. "Hi there," said Annie, gently shaking him. The young man opened his eyes. "Who are you?" he asked in a hoarse voice. "Where are the dogs?" "The dogs are gone. We're Jack and Annie," said Annie. We won't leave you." "Thank you," breathed the soldier. And he closed his eyes again. He was trembling with cold. Annie pulled off her monk's robe and tucked it around the soldier. Jack did the same. Annie began rubbing one of the soldier's shaking hands. Jack rubbed the other. As the snow flew around them, Jack wondered what to do. Where was Barry? How could they get the soldier up to his feet? How would they find their way back to the monastery? "Listen," said Annie, as if answering Jack's questions. Jack heard distant voices. He heard booming barks. People were coming to help, and Barry was leading the way. The huge dog was bounding down the narrow passage to the young soldier. He seemed startled. When he saw Jack and Annie. He sniffed them and then barked his booming bark. Jack wasn't sure what Barry was saying now. He wondered if it might be, "How the heck did you change from dogs back into humans?" "Magic," said Jack. Barry just panted. But Jack had the feeling he understood. Hello, Brother Michael was hurrying up the narrow passage. Behind him were two front soldiers who had stopped earlier at the monastery. The soldiers dropped to their knees and helped lift that avalanche victim to his feet. They wrapped Jack and Annie's robes tightly around him. "Did Barry find you?" Jack asked Brother Michael. "Yes, we had just met these soldiers on the pass when Barry came running up to us," said the monk. "How did you guys get to the monastery?" "He escaped when we weren't looking," said Jack. "When we found him, he led us to the buried soldier." "Amazing," said Brother Michael. Barry wagged his tail. It didn't seem to worry him any longer that Jack and Annie had turned back into people. Dogs accept whatever comes along, Jack thought. "We must help the young man to the monastery," said Brother Michael. The two soldiers lifted the rescued man to his feet and helped him walk. "Barry, lead us home." Barry took a lead with Jack and Annie. The three soldiers and Brother Michael followed. "I love being a dog," Jack whispered to Annie. "I love all of it." Didn't you? Didn't you love it?" "Of course I did," said Annie, grinning. "Playing with you and Barry was one of the happiest things I've ever done in my life," Jack said. And we helped teach him stuff, and we helped him save a life." "I know," said Annie. As he hurried through the snow beside Barry, Jack tried to remember how it felt to be a dog. He moved quickly, keeping in step with Barry, practicing gait. He inhaled the cold, fresh wind, smelling smokewood and falling snow. By the time they had reached the monastery, the wind and snow had stopped. Jack held the door open for Brother Michael and the 3 soldiers. Then he, Annie, and Barry followed them inside. Father Laurent and another man were waiting for them in the torchlit hallway. The man wore a long gray overcoat and a large black hat in the shape of a triangle. He had a pale face, and his gray eyes were deeply set above a long, straight nose. Jack thought he looked familiar. So the mission officer has been found. Wonderful, said Father Laurent. Brother Michael, please make him comfortable by the fire and in the parlor. Bring him hot soup. Brother Michael led the soldiers down the hall. Jack and Annie, said Father Laurent, may I present you to Consul Napoleon Bonaparte? Now Jack knew why the man was so familiar. He had seen paintings of the famous military leader in history books. Napoleon Bonaparte took off his hat and bowed his head. When he straightened up, he looked at Jack and Annie with a piercing gaze. Am I to understand how have saved my man from a snowy grave? Napoleon Bonaparte said. Not us, Council, sir, said Jack. It was Barry. The big dog was swinging his tail and panting. Barry saved the lost soldier, exclaimed Father Laurent. Oh my, I knew that you were trying to train him, but I had no idea you could work miracles. How did you do that? Well, I guess, we know how to think like dogs, said Jack. Delightful. Good dogs. All 3 of you, said Father Laurent, laughing. Barry sneezed. Jack and Annie sneezed too. I think we all need some hot tea and a fire, said Father Laurent. Come, let us go into my library. Thank you, but I fear we must be on my way, Napoleon Bonaparte said. I will allow my 3 men to rest here, but I must return to camp. I will see you tomorrow with all your dogs. And of course, he patted Barry's head. I hope that I see one lead dog leads the way. He is a great dog. Indeed, he is, said Father Laurent. Good afternoon, Your Excellency. The French ruler opened the door and stepped out into the cold. He returned back and saluted them. Then he strode away alone through the snow. Father Laurent closed the door. He looked at Jack and Annie and laughed. This has been quite a day, he said, shaking his head. I met Napoleon Bonaparte for the first time, and Barry became a true saint. Let us celebrate with a cup of tea, and fresh pot is waiting in the library. Thank you, that sounds great, said Annie. She looked at Jack. Sure, cool, said Jack. Jack, Annie, and Barry followed Father Laurent down the main hall. He opened the door to a large room lit with flickering candle and a blazing fire. Barry flopped down near the fireplace. Jack and Annie looked around at the room. Shadows played on shelves with rows of leather-bound books. Along one of the walls were glass cabinets filled with display and butterflies, other insects, feathers, and rocks. "Oh, wow," breathed Jack. "This is a great room." "I confess it is my favorite room in all the world," said Father Lawrence. "I am a lover of knowledge." "So are we," said Jack. "Wonderful." "I thought you might be," said the monk. "Come sit, please." He led them to a small table. Then he all sat down, and Father Lawrence poured tea from a silver pot into 3 china cups. As they each took a sip of the hot tea, sweet tea, Barry barked. He stood up and wagged his tail, staring at them. He barked again. "He wants our attention," said Father Lawrence, shaking his head. Quiet, Barry." But Barry barked again. "Oh," said Annie, "I know what he wants. He wants to show you something. Barry, stay." She walked to the other side of the room. Barry didn't move. "Come, Barry." Barry walked to Annie and stood very still. "Sit, Barry," said Annie. Barry sat. His tail thumped to the stone floor. "My, I can't believe it," said Father Lawrence. "It's like magic." "You have no idea," said Annie. Jack laughed. "Good dog, Barry," he said. "Perhaps you would like to brush him," Father Lawrence said to Annie. The monk got a large brush from the shelf and gave it to her. Brushing always makes a saint happy, and Barry was more than earned his happiness today. Annie got up from her chair and knelt beside Barry. As she gently brushed his beautiful thick fur, Barry leaned against her and put his paws on her foot. Father Lawrence smiled. "A saint leans against you to keep you warm," he said. "And he'll put his paw on your front foot to keep it warm, too." "That sounds like you love dogs," said Annie. Indeed I do," said Father Lawrence. "I love all nature. In fact, I often leave the monastery and go on expeditions just to study the nature world." "What do you do your expeditions on?" asked Jack. "Oh, I have gatherings, many rare specimens of butterflies, other insects, rocks, and minerals, as you can see from my display," said Father Lawrence, pointing to a cactus in his library. "But I am not botanist for the foremost." "A botanist," said Annie. "A botanist studies plants," said Father Lawrence. He stood up and walked over to a shelf and picked out a large book with a pale cloth cover. "This is my most precious treasure. On my mountain expeditions, I have found many rare and beautiful flowers. They are preserved in this book." Jack's heart started to pound. "You mean you have real flowers in that book?" he asked. "Yes," said Father Lawrence. "Would you like to see them?" Jack and Annie nodded. Father Lawrence smiled and brought the book over to the table. Chapter 10, Spirits of the Buttercup. Father Lawrence sat down at the table and opened his flower book. Jack and Annie looked over the monk's shoulder. Even Barry stepped closer to the table and pushed his giant head under Father Lawrence's elbow to look at the book. The monk carefully turned the rough-lined pages. The pages were blank, but present between them were leaves and flowers. Father Lawrence gently held up a cluster of tiny pink flowers. The flowers were completely flat and dry, but they had kept all their petals in color. These are Androscac alpint. That's their scientific name. The popular name is Alpine rock jasmine, said the monk. Several summers ago, I found these hidden among many mountain rocks. Nice, said Annie. Jack held his breath. Could there be a white and yellow flower in this book? Father Lawrence turned another page and very carefully picked up a dark golden flower. This is Caltha polastrans, better known as marsh marigold, he said. I found it 2 years ago in the southern Alps. Lovely, said Annie. Father Lawrence turned another page. He held up a dried white flower. Custon fontana, the mouse-ear chickweed, the monk said. Its tiny petals look like the ears of a mouse. Cute, said Annie. Yes, said Father Lawrence. He gently closed the cloth-covered book. Since you like flowers so much, I assume you would like butterflies too. Let me show you my favorites. He started to stand up. No, wait, please, said Jack. He tried to keep his voice steady. Do you happen to have a white and yellow flower in that book? Father Lawrence frowned. Let me see. Yes, of course. He opened the book again and turned to a page until he found what he was looking for. He carefully held up the flower with white petals and yellow center. It shone in the firelight as if it were still alive. Runiculus glacialis, the glacial buttercup, said the monk. One of its highest flowering plants is the Alps. Perfect. A perfect specimen. I found it not far from the monastery just last summer. That's it, whispered Jack. That's exactly what we're looking for. We're looking for a glacial buttercup. Father Lawrence asked. Why? Why? Said Jack. He wasn't sure what to say. We some friends who really love flowers, said Annie, and when we were heading out to do research in the Alps, they asked us to please try to find one of those and bring it back to them. I see, said the monk. Well then, allow me to give you this glacier buttercup to take back to your friend. I'm sure I can find another later in the summer. It is the least I can do. Thank you for your wonderful work you did with Barry today. Thank you, said Jack. Do you know if the glacier buttercup has a special meaning, said Annie. Father Laurent squinted at the flower. Well, throughout history, many flowers had special meanings, said Father Laurent. Let me think. Wait, please, said Jack. He quickly pulled out his notebook and pencil. Okay, ready. If I recall, buttercups stand for childhood, the carefree, open spirit of childhood, said Father Laurent. Such a joyful spirit can brighten even the most bleak and barren place. Jack quickly wrote, Buttercup, spirit of childhood, joy, carefree, open. Jack looked at Father Laurent. That sounds like a spirit of a dog, he said. He stroked Barry's ears. It felt warm and velvet. Father Laurent smiled. Yes, it does, he said. Dogs and children sharing a common spirit. I do agree with that. Jack and Annie looked at each other. Well, I guess we'd better leave now, he said. Jack said. He put away his pencil and notebook. Can you not stay another night? Asked Father Laurent. It will be dark soon. That's okay. We can find our way home even in the dark, said Jack. And where is your home? Asked the monk. It's down the mountain a ways, and said Annie. It's not exactly in the first village you come to, but it's outside the village. You know, before you see the church steeple. There you turn left onto a winding path, and then go a while, and then turn right, and then left. She shrugged. Well, we know how to find it. I see, said Father Laurent. Though he looked a little bewildered, he stood up. Let's carefully pack your flower so you can carry it to your friends. The monks took 2 pieces of thick paper from the flower book and placed the glacier buttercup between them. Then he handed it to Jack. Jack gently placed the flower at the bottom of his bag. Father Laurent led Jack and Annie out of the library. Barry followed them down the hall. When they reached the front hall, Annie looked at the big dog. You have to stay here, Barry, she said. Barry's tail stopped wagging. Perhaps he can walk with you part of the way, said Father Laurent. Then just send him back to me. I think now that you've trained him, he can come back home by himself. Great, thank you, said Annie. Father Laurent opened the door. Farewell, my friends. Travel safely, he said. Come back for dinner, Barry. Barry barked as if he understood, and then bounded out into the snow. Jack and Annie followed him. The snow was completely stopped, and the sky was clear. The setting sun cast brilliant light over the mountains. Jack remembered that the treehouse had landed on a slope above the wide pass. His sense of direction seemed nearer than before. I think we originally came from that way, he said. Let's try it. Jack led Annie and Barry away from the Moon Monastery. His eyes searched the pass for signs of the treehouse, until finally he thought he saw it. Brown wooden nestled on a slope among gray boulders with it. He said, pointing. That's it, he said, pointing. Over there. Jack started to run, and Annie and Barry ran with him. As they raced through the clear, crisp air, Jack remembered what it felt like to be a dog. The cold didn't bother him at all. He didn't feel sore or stiff. Nothing hindered his body. He almost and most of all, he felt a wild joy. He felt as if he could run forever. Finally, laughing and panting, Jack, Annie, and Barry reached the base of the slope below the treehouse. The setting sun covered the mountain with purple light. Barry barked. Jack couldn't tell what. Jack could tell he wanted to climb into the treehouse with them. You have to go back to Father Lawrence now, Barry, Jack said softly. He tugged on Barry's velvet ear. But we think you're a great dog, and so does Napoleon. Barry made a snuffling sound. Annie turned her face away from Barry and Jack. Annie, aren't you going to say goodbye to him? said Jack. Annie looked at Jack. Her eyes were filled with tears. How do I do that? She said. How do I say goodbye to him? You tell him how you feel about him. Tell him about all the good things waiting for him back at the monastery, said Jack. The fire, the food, Father Moore and Brother Michael, and all those other dogs. And tell him he's going to save lots of lives. Annie knelt down and put her arms around Barry's giant head. He licked her as she clutched him. Tell him, Annie. Tell him, Annie, Jack urged her. Annie lifted Barry's ear and whispered into it for a long time. Jack couldn't hear all that she said, but he caught words. Love and all my life. Then Annie stood up and pointed toward the monastery. Smoke was rising from the chimney. Go home, Barry, she said. It's where you belong. Barry looked from Jack to Annie. He sneezed. Then he climbed down the slope and took off for home. Annie turned away quickly and wiped her eyes. Let's go, she said, and she scrambled up the slope and climbed through the treehouse window. Jack followed her. Inside the treehouse, he picked up the Pennsylvania book. He pointed to a picture of Frog Creek woods. I wish we could go there, where we belong, he said. Booming dog barks came from the distance. Echoes of the barks filled the air. Barking echoed from the directions of the sky and clouds and rocks, slopes, and purple mountains, peaks of the great St. Bernard Pass. The wind began to blow. The treehouse started to spin. It spun faster and faster. Then everything was still. Absolutely still. Jack and Annie were wearing their jeans and sweatshirts again. Jack's bag was a backpack. No time at all had passed in Frog Creek. Dawn was still breaking. Dogs were barking in the distance, and the woods were filled with birdsong. You okay? Jack asked Annie. She nodded. Barry's gonna save lots of lives, said Jack. I know it. Annie smiled. He was so funny, she said, wistfully. Yeah, and he was happy, said Jack. He reached into the backpack and carefully lifted out the papers of the Glacier Buttercup. He handed the dried flowers to Annie. Then she pulled out the rhyming reared and read it. The second thing to break the spell is a white flower and yellow flower. Live its meaning for yourselves. Only for an hour. I guess we did live its meaning for an hour, said Jack. The joyful spirit of Father Lawrence talked about, said Annie. Jack nodded. For exactly an hour, while I was a dog, I was perfectly happy, he said. Only for an hour, perfectly happy, said Annie. Jack shrugged. The rest of the time I was pretty worried. About what? Said Annie. Well, in the beginning, of course, I worried about the avalanche and losing you, said Jack. Then I worried that Ted and Kathleen had sent us to the wrong place. I worried about finding the flower. I worried about wasting time training Barry. Then I worried about finding him. You worry about a lot, Jack, said Annie. I know, said Jack. I needed a dog to teach me how to have a child's joyful spirit. And Barry needed you to learn how to be responsible, said Annie. You taught him how to listen to others and how to find avalanche victims. You helped bring out instincts and to be a rescue dog, Jack. You did a great job. Oh, Jack felt his face getting red. Well, you did a great job too. You really did. Whatever, said Annie modestly. At least we found the second thing to help save Penny. She carefully placed the glacier buttercup on the corner of the treehouse. Jack reached into his bag and took out the emerald rose and placed it beside the flower. We have 2 things so far, said Annie. And we need 2 more, said Jack. But right now, we have to hurry home and sneak back into our rooms and put on our pajamas and get into bed so Mom and Dad can wake us up and tell us to get ready for school, said Annie. Jack laughed. We live a weird life, he said. Yep, said Annie, but I like it all. Me too, said Jack. And they started down the rope ladder, headed for home.